Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for our first FishSounds Educate Seminar. This will be a whole host of seminar series running through March of next year, about every 2 weeks with a nice hiatus over the holidays. Our next seminar will be on November 22nd, and you can register at the FishSounds website, which I'll type a link in the chat momentarily. But for today, we're really excited to have Fannie joining us, a researcher at the South Africa Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and the Environment. And before I hand it over, please note that this seminar is being recorded and it'll be put on the FishSounds YouTube channel for future viewing. And we should also have plenty of time for questions at the end, so make sure to think of some good ones while we're going. So with that, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for the introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to give the first talk on your FishSounds Educate Seminar Series. So I'm excited to share my work that I've done in the past couple of years, and hopefully it will be of interest to everyone. I think it would be interesting for me to share some of the work of marine mammal sounds, specifically from the Southern Hemisphere. This will be sounds from from South Africa, and some from Antarctica, and some from the subantarctic region. Just to give a brief introduction to what I'll be talking about, usually I start with this slide in my class when I teach my students, and that's when you see everyone hiding under the desk, like thinking, what the hell? What is this? What is this asking? Why is he asking us when I go, what is acoustics? But basically, it's simple as far as I'm concerned, because I think it's a science that deals with the physical properties of sound, both in air and underwater. And sound is produced, just like you can know, with a drum by a vibration of an element. In this case, as you can see from the drum, when you hit it with a stick, there will be a vibration, and the intensity of the sound will be higher closer to the source, and it decreases as you move further away from the source. Similarly, as I speak, my vocal cords are vibrating, and that's how I'm producing sounds or voice, that as you can hear. Similarly, marine mammals do the same way. They do the vibration of their vocal cords, and they produce sounds for those that have vocal cords. Um, Interestingly enough, the use of underwater acoustics was discovered by Leonardo da Vinci in 1490, and this he did it through a very simple technique where he inserted a tube in water, and he listened, and he could hear ships from a distance underwater. And that's when it's been developed from there on, and now we have hydrophones, sophisticated hydrophones that can be directional and so on, that we're using nowadays to study marine mammals and many other things. And it was used also during the World Wars to find submarines, as the Navy would listen, and they were able to hear the enemy submarines approaching, which they could not see from the surface, as submarines are usually underwater. And water is a perfect medium for sounds, for sound studies, as sound tend to be faster and can travel longer distances in water than in air. For example, the speed of sound in water is 5 times more than that in air. Other sources of energy, such as light, heat, and other forms, will only be able to allow us to study the first upper 100 meters, but with sound, we are able to study deeper than that. And now I will take you to my subjects of interest, which are marine mammals, and study their ecology, population dynamics, and behavior, with a principal objective to provide information that will be useful for management and conservation. And this is important for us, not only here in the Southern Hemisphere, but also in the Northern Hemisphere, because most of the marine mammals, mainly whales, were harvested in the past for their meat and other products, including oil, that were used by humans for various purposes. And we can see here, for example, with blue whales, by the time they were protected in the early 70s, they were almost depleted. They were almost went to extinction by the time of protection. And we see also with other wells as well that as, for example, if humpback whales were depleted, the whalers will shift to other species that are abundant. Blue whales were depleted, then they'll move on to fin whales and so on. And as a result of that whaling era, we see that most of the species are endangered and some are vulnerable and some of them are near threatened, such as minke whale. And for example, with Southern right whale, we can see it of this concern. So what is happening now during whaling era, for example, with Southern right whale, we see that there were very few of them sighted, and post-whaling era, or today, back in 2019, we can see where there was an increase. And that is also confirmed by the modeling here that some of the species post-whaling are increasing. And it's important for us to be able to study them and have more information on them. And acoustics provide that powerful tool, or sound provide that powerful tool for us to be able to study these marine mammals. Why use passive acoustic monitoring? We're using it because most marine mammals are very vocal active and they produce sound throughout all seasons of the year. And this is a cost-effective method of monitoring and tracking. For example, it costs the amount of money it will cost us for a vessel to be at sea one day. We can purchase one instrument that can be able to record for a year. So it's no brainer that acoustics is a very cost-effective method of collecting data to study marine mammals. However, there's a caveat with passive acoustic monitoring, since we can only detect or track animals that produce sounds, and those that are quiet or not vocalizing at a given time, we're not able to monitor them. Furthermore, sound is important to marine mammals as they use it for communication. We can see in this picture where whale A is communicating to whale B, and they can be able to know their whereabouts and other things. And they use sound for navigation in the dark. Those who dive very deep in the ocean and they cannot see, they use sound for navigation through echolocation, and they can use it for mating, advertise between mates, and see who's powerful and help with a mate selection for females. And they also use it for prey searching. You can see, for example, with this dolphin, where it can send a signal or sonar signal that goes in the water and can be able to triangulate to a millimeter or centimeter accuracy and be able to catch its prey in the dark without using sight to see such prey. Furthermore, they also use sound to avoid danger for example, with vessels in the water. As vessels are louder, they can be able to move away from the vessel to avoid collision, and they can avoid predators, especially with killer whales. We know that when killer whales are in the area and vocalizing, many mammals will, or even seals, will move away from that area to avoid being predated. So sound is so very helpful to marine mammals and other organisms in the ocean. I'll provide some more background why we use acoustic to study marine mammals. It is also weather and light independent, meaning we can conduct surveys or collect data any time of the day, which is different from sighting surveys that can only be done during the day. And sound can travel long distances than light underwater. So we're able to detect sounds of marine mammals from long distances. And I'll provide examples of this later in my presentation. Marine mammals are great sound producers. They can produce sounds with high source levels, as high as 200 dB relative to 1 micropascal at 1 meter. And they produce region and species-specific calls or so on. So we can be able to differentiate between animals and know where they come from and so on. With low frequency sound, that enables them to communicate below most of the high frequency noise, and also allows them to have high detection ranges. These studies also allow us to get information about the vocal behavior, males versus female or both sexes, call rates, and the frequency, eventually, which will allow us to determine the density and get abundance from acoustic measurements. Why are marine mammals important? They are important because they help with the functioning of the ecosystem, as we can see in this example from this paper where in this case, it's a humpback whale that is fed and is fertilizing the ocean with its poop. And that fertilized ocean will also provide food for fish and seabirds, and that will take all of the nutrients, those migrate in closer into land, and some of the nutrients for the fish that will die in closer to land will fertilize the land, and that will provide nutrients or fertilized land for land-based animals, and also seabirds as they fly and they poop inland, they also fertilize land around. And it has been found through also 2,000 or so kilometers away from the ocean that some of the trees on land have stable isotopes from sea background. And lastly, whale falls, they also fertilize the ocean, which help with the functioning of the ocean as well. Now I'll take you through some of the study sites where collecting data. Now that I've introduced you to how passive acoustic monitoring work, my study sites are based here in South Africa. With one on the Benguela ecosystem where we've collected data or closer to the shore. This was at 1,000-meter water depth, and this is at 4,000-meter depth, so coastal and very far offshore. And this area is important because there was a former whaling station here. So it's important for us to find information about how the marine mammals use this area. Previously, it was used for overwintering, calving, and mating and migration, and also for feeding for some whales. And then I'll also present some results from Antarctica, which is on ice, mainly results from this from a seamount called the Moder ice, which produces bathymetry, induces upwelling, and becomes a very productive area. And as such, as the cold warmer comes up to the surface, it melts ice and causes polynyas. I'll show you pictures of that later. And also, it's an important phytoplankton bloom that support krill, which is food for most marine mammals, especially whales. And I'll also have some results which is in between Antarctica and South Africa in the subantarctic region. That will be results from the Prince Edward Island, as you can see here. And how do we collect that data? Such data, we use moorings. Most of the time, I piggyback on oceanographic moorings that are deployed to collect data on temperature and so on that are used for forecasting climate on land. And we can see here's one of the hydrophones. This case in Oral M2 that was deployed on oceanographic mooring to collect data. If there are no oceanographic moorings, then we have especially designed moorings that we can use to collect our own data to provide acoustic data, as we can see in this case. So how a mooring works, we have an anchor that holds all the instruments to the ground, and then acoustic releases that we can use to release the instrument we come to collect, and then you have an acoustic recorder, and then a float that keeps the mooring upright so it can be at the desired depth, and we can collect data from that desired depth. And for statistical analysis, I use my favorite model, which is called the random forest model. This is an ensemble model. It grows multiple trees during training process in the forest, and from there using decision trees to decide which one is the best prediction results based on voting mechanism. As you can see here, the red will be the ones that will be selected by the model, and that will be used as the best prediction results to use for the model. What makes this model so powerful is that it's a non-parametric model, meaning it doesn't assume any distribution of the data, and you can plug in data of any sort, and you'll be able to handle it. Now, I'll go into some specific results. Now, I'll start with Antarctic blue and fin whales that I've studied for so long, and those I'll look at results from Antarctica and west coast of South Africa. And lastly, I'll talk about results from the subantarctic region that will be presented at a later stage. From our study, this is the data we collected of Antarctica next to the sea ice edge, and we compared to what was collected in different regions, we could see that in this case, this is what is called a Z-call. It's unique to the Antarctic blue whale, and it's only produced by Antarctic blue whales. So we know whenever we detect Z-call, so the Z-call, is only produced by Antarctic blue whales. And it was for the first time that we could see that sometimes when whales are very close, they could produce calls that have harmonics. And that was interesting for the blue whale community to see such happening. And these are this female actually has pulse that can be highlighted here in this red box, and they're produced in this case with Z calls simultaneously. And this is how a Z call sound like. They are 20 hertz, so they're very magnified for us to be able to hear that below our hearing range. So let's see how it sounds like. All right, that's how a Z call sounds like. It's nothing very interesting, but it transmits very useful information to its conspecific. And now we look into that data to see how the whales appearing off the west coast of South Africa. We saw first from 2015, so from 2014 to 2016, there was a seasonal occurrence where most of the whales were occurring in winter, meaning if we had these results on low effort, all these whales are here to overwinter. However, when we collected more data, we saw that the whales were present year-round. This was from 2015 to 2017. We can see that blue whales are most present in winter, but are present year-round, which was interesting that they could switch between years in terms of their abundance. And we look into the environmental conditions, and we found that when they occurred so much for the whole year, there was an increase in chlorophyll A, meaning sometimes they could use the west coast of Africa for feeding and year-round presence when the environmental conditions allow, excuse me. And that was also fascinating because whales are rarely seen off the west coast of South Africa. Blue whales were last seen in 2012 before this paper where we found whales in 2019. And ever since then, there've never been a sighting of Antarctic blue whales in South Africa. But our acoustics is showing that these animals are present year-round. So this is another interesting tool that bring us information that we would not have known otherwise if we're to use other methods. And now we look into the occurrence of fin and blue whale in Antarctica. We see that blue whales are present year-round from the recordings and sightings to confirm that. However, fin whales, they seem to be present in summer when there's no ice around Antarctica, most of the open waters. But as soon as there's ice, they seem to disappear from the Antarctic region. And then we compared behavior between the two sides, between South Africa and Antarctica, and we can see that they seem to be showing site-specific behavior. For example, this is from South Africa. The graphs or the figures on your left would be from South Africa, and those ones on the right would be from Antarctica. We see in South Africa, in winter, they seem to vocalize more during the day, and in Antarctica, they vocalize more at night. And similarly with the calls, they will produce more at night in South Africa. And sometimes in Antarctica, they'll feed more during the day. The calls are those calls that are thought to be produced during feeding, but they're also being observed to be produced during mating by some blue whales. And what is also interesting from this is that the call rates are different. We see from Antarctica in terms of calls, you get as much as 15 calls per minute, and year of South Africa, we're having half of that, about 7 calls per minute. And that is related to the number of whales that are found in the area. In Antarctica, we know they are aggregating, they're found in big groups. And then when they come to the low latitude, they tend to disperse and go to different regions, as they do not have such factor as well when there are a lot of people who tend to talk a lot compared to when there are few people, then you tend not to talk as much. And then we look into the detection ranges of the calls. We see in South Africa, we have very low detection range as much as 60 kilometers, whereas in Antarctica, we can have detection range is as high as 1,700 kilometers. And that is mainly because of the difference in noise. And I'll talk more about that later, where we know off the west coast of South Africa, we have a lot of vessel traffic producing a lot of noise, and that is reducing the detection range of these wells. However, in some years, we can see that we get some high detection ranges when the noise levels are low. And this was the case in one of the studies which we did after these two studies, that we could find detection ranges as long as 8 kilometers. So noise seems to be an important factor in the communication, and wells will have to adapt to this. And I'll show some of the results on how they actually respond to these later. And now moving on to another species of interest, Antarctic minke whales. We look at them off the west coast of Africa and Antarctica, and we could see that when we look at different times, we're finding that they have different locations, they're producing different call types, and we produce from such measurements the first description of the seasonality and behavior in South Africa, which was interesting. So one of the findings from our work is that previously minke whales were thought to have harmonics up to 1 kilohertz, as you can see here, but we found that the actually harmonics based on the previous study were actually lower than what they actually do nowadays. It can be 2 kilohertz or actually even louder. Oh, sorry, my bad. And this is how the minke whale bioduct sounds like. They're called bioducts because they sound, or whenever the Navy listened to them in the earlier days, I thought they sounded like a duck or prayer. Yeah. And recent studies are even finding that harmonics of minke whales, they can go as high as 2.5 kilohertz. And these are different from region, and we can see from our studies of the west coast of Africa, find 10 pulses, and other studies in Antarctica, in Western Antarctica, they found about 12 to 13 pulses. So they seem to be differing or changing their behavior depending on the region. And it is the seasonal occurrence, which was interesting that when we're detecting well calls in Antarctica on the 12th figure, we seem to be also detecting minke whale calls here in South Africa as well, which makes sense because we saw that they seem to love ice, and this is a time of the year where there's a lot of ice in Antarctica, and some of them do not migrate as such. So it shows complex and not defined migration in terms of minke whale, which is interesting and warrant more study to understand this kind of behavior and occurrence. And similarly, we can see that also we have a variation between the same area in South Africa. Some areas are preferred compared to other areas. And this is what I was explaining earlier about Antarctica, where we talk about polynyas. This is what a polynea looks like, an open area in an area covered by ice. And this seems to be explained by sea surface temperature. And we see when we have warm sea surface temperature, in this case, you can see here, this opening, these are polynyas, showing that when warm waters are variable, it brings up the opening of these polynyas, which are important for Antarctic minke whales. And we can see it here that an Antarctic minke whale, they really love ice and they can break through ice-infested water. And now move on to suffering right whales. Previously, we had only knowledge from inshore data, which was collected using sighting surveys, and we didn't have any information or acoustic knowledge. And these sounds enable us to study the acoustic knowledge and understand how suffering right whales vocalize here in South Africa. And this is important for this species because it's of high concern given the low or fluctuating calf-cow counts in recent years, and it is important for us to get some indication of their year-round presence and their behavior and so on. And we still have to study and find out their detection ranges, and these studies, such as acoustic, will able to provide us where they go and where they're found at different times of the year. And for sovereign right whales, they produce this interesting call called a gunshot sound. It basically sounds like a gunshot. As you can see here, these are some of the gunshots that were produced, and they are sometimes produced just as one pulse like that, or they can have two pulses, and sometimes they have an echo and a reverberation. And this is how it sounds like. Just like as the name says, it really sounds like a gunshot. And unfortunately, we currently do not know the function of it, but there's so many studies looking into establishing the function of this call. And this was the occurrence of the calls, or the gunshot calls of the west of South Africa. We could see that we were detecting it from the hydrophone oral one that was deployed at a water depth of 200 meters. And then we're not detecting it from a hydrophone that was deployed at 300 meters, 5 kilometers away from each other, which was interesting. And similarly, and a similar phenomenon can be seen here as well for 2016 and 17, that the hydrophone deployed at 200 meters was able to detect the gunshots, and the one deployed at 300 meters was not able to do so. And that was interesting for us. And we looked into this, and we could only explain this by the physics, where we can see in this case, you see this warm water close to the surface, and as you go down or deeper into the deeper ocean, the water becomes cooler. And we could not be able to understand or have understood it if it was not for this study that previously found that the thermocline, which could have been formed around 200 meters in this case of the west coast of South Africa, will have acted as an acoustic barrier, meaning it stops all the sound that were produced above 200 from being detected by instruments that were deployed deeper than 200. So that's one of the interesting phenomena, especially that one needs to consider when you're studying the depth of your hydrophone, so that you can be able to study your animals depending on where they produce sound. Now I'll move on to sperm whales that are deep diving, and they are tooth whales. And we're able to study them using sound as well. So you can see from the results that I'm presenting here, that acoustics allow us to study a whole diverse group of marine mammals, and give us information that will not be able to do if we're not using this method. From sperm whales, we found that they were producing feeding calls or clicks throughout the year. As you can see, there's a slow click used for communication. As it zooms in and as it zooms closer to the target, it starts to produce a high number of calls and be able to detect the target. And this is how they sound like. And those towards the end recorders, which are thought to be population specific and can be used to differentiate different groups of sperm whales. And also, just like with blue whales, we can see that noise was affecting the detection ranges. When there is high noise, we're finding low detection ranges, and we're not able to detect calls from distances. And this is looking at the acoustic occurrence over time. And we can clearly see that unlike sovereign right whales, where we were only able to detect them from one instrument that was at 100, we seem to be detecting them from both instruments, because at deep diving, they break that barrier and be able to go beyond the thermocline and vocalize at those different depths. Now, moving on to humpback whales, similarly, we use sound as well to be able to detect their or determine the acoustic occurrence, and they produce what are known as song. I'm sure most of us or most of you have heard humpback whale songs, how they sing, and this is the most popular whale species that has been studied in terms of sound production. And this is how some of the sound or of the songs that we recorded off the west coast of South Africa sound like. That's pretty cool. And we then use those sounds to look into their acoustic occurrence. And similarly, like sperm whales, they don't seem to have the acoustic barrier because they can produce sounds at different depths. And also the detection ranges were also affected by noise. Importantly, is that we with this species, we seem to have comparable occurrence results both from the shallow instrument with the deeper instrument, meaning they're producing sound everywhere. They're very vocal active compared to suffering right whales that seem to vocalize on the surface and maybe reduce the vocalization as they dive deeper. And now these studies just bring everything together from the West Coast to see how noise could possibly affect the acoustic behavior and adaptability of marine mammals here in South Africa. And we can see the first graph, this one shows the traffic. There's so much traffic that we get about 5,000 or so vessels per month. And that varies for some months, but there are no bigger differences. And because of such contribution of vessel noise, we can see that for the low frequency band, it seems to be isolated from the other frequency bands because from 10 to about 100 hertz, those are the frequency bands dominated by vessel noise. And then now we look into how these whales respond to such noise. And we can see species-specific responses. Blue whales and fin whales, they seem to increase their detectability or their vocalization rate with the increase in noise. As you can see, that's the probability of detection on the y-axis. And the x-axis, that will be the noise increase. As you see, the noise increases, they also increase in the vocalizing rates. Other whales, they seem to not respond by decreasing their vocalizing rates in response to such increase in noise. And that is important and will affect the health and ecology of these whales, given that now they have to compete with underwater noise for them to communicate with their conspecifics. And now I'll switch on to seals. We know that they are found on land or on ice packs and then go underwater at some time to produce sound. They are also marine mammals as well. And the first one I'll look at is the crab eater seals. And we look at them in Antarctica, and we found that they produce a coal that is called the Mon coal, and they can produce them in different variants. As we can see here, it looks like they sometimes have a band of frequency modulation and so on. And this is how they sound. It's a very nice, cool, interesting sounds to listen to. They're about 2.5 seconds long and are very interesting to listen to. And we look into the acoustic of occurrence of crab eater seals using sound. And what we found was interesting is that when the ice was very far from our recording location, we're not detecting any seals, but as soon as ice started to occur around the hydrophone location, we started picking up crab eater seals. And as the more the ice increased, we're detecting a lot of these crab eater seals as they enjoy or they need ice to rest on and sleep and so on. Previous studies show that crab eater seals only vocalize during the breeding season, that is from October to January. But in this case, we can see that these seals are actually vocalizing from May, earlier than thought in the past, which brought us or gave us more information as these animals are actually vocalizing more than what we previously fought, even when they're not mating or during their breeding season, they're actually vocalizing and practicing their calls before they can actually have the competition during the breeding season. And we look into their dial vocalizing pattern. We can see, as expected, seals during the day they sleep. We have low call rates during the day, and then at night they're more active than have high call rates at night. And as expected from our random forest model, we see that distance to the sea ice was the most important predictor, and the month was the most important predictor of the occurrence. Since, these two are correlated, ice will increase with winter months and vice versa. And now look into the in-air vocalizations of crab eater cells, and these are the sounds they produce. They produce hisses, which from our study, we found them to be produced during arousal when they were stimulated by a particular event. For example, caregivers approaching them or other seal in the area, and then they were producing mourn calls. They were producing three types of them. They have a short mourn call, the medium mourn call, and then the brief mourn call. And such classification was also confirmed by our random classification method, that random forest classification method, that these calls that we have here are indeed different. Interestingly, or important fact about this is that these animals were previously thought not to vocalize in air. So this was a very nice opportunity for us to show that there's still a whole lot more that we don't know about these marine mammals, and this study provided such information that crab eater seals actually vocalize in air, not only underwater. And this confirmed what I said previously, that these animals are stimulated by presence of people. We can see here when they're before feeding, they increase the duration of the hiss, and then during the feeding, because the feeding they're more relaxed, the duration of the hiss is decreased, and post-feeding they also just rest normal, and during transportation they're also stimulated, then they will increase the duration of the hiss. And in terms of the production rate, we didn't see any difference between the different events, but there was slight increases in the number of hisses that they were producing. Now look into Ross and leopard seals that are found in Antarctica. I've been to Antarctica several times. I've never seen a Ross seal, and it was interesting for me to listen to them. So once again, here, AQUISIC provided us an opportunity to study animals that are rarely seen. And how we collected data for this study, we had sonar buoys that were deployed all over Antarctica, and we can see here the different colors of the circles, and that data was collected between 1998 and 2009. And when we look into their presence only, we can see that only sonar buoys that were deployed closer to the sea ice age were able to detect calls of these marine mammals. And these are the calls that they produce. Leopard seals, they produce a whole lot of different calls. And Ross seals, they only produce just three types, which are all siren calls. So they have high frequency siren calls, as we can see here, and then the medium frequency calls, and then the low frequency calls. And these are called polysiren because they do sound like a siren, as you can hear now. Yep, that's how they sound. They're pretty cool to listen to. And this is the call usage over time for both species, and we can see there's a change in the amount of calls they use over time in terms of percentage, and that could be used as an adaptation to changes in the environment. And more studies are needed to confirm this from now onwards. Now move on to the sub-Antarctic region. Now we're looking at killer whales, and these are very important in the ecosystem as they are the main predator, and they control the ecosystem by feeding on other marine mammals and other animals that are found in an area. And for the Prince Edward Island or the Sub-Antarctic region, we found 5 descriptive call types: the upsweep, downsweep, the squeaks. That's the way they sound. So this is how it looks like. The downsweep, it goes up, it's an upsweep. And this is a whistle, sounds like a whistle, sounds like a tone. And this is the echolocation clicks that they produce. And this is how their calls sound like. Hope you could hear that. That's the next one. So these are pretty cool sounds for animal sophias to be producing such tame, cute sounds that are feared by other animals in the ecosystem. And then we look into their acoustic occurrence and we link it to their prey, which are seals, suffering elephant seals. And we can see that their occurrence in bars here seem to correspond well with the presence of seals in the subantarctic region. And also we confirm that these calls that we're detecting are also from killer whales, and that we have setting surveys on beaches to actually confirm that when killer whales are sighted, we're actually recording killer whale songs as well. And we also link that to the environment, and we can see that their presence, also their vocalizing behavior is affected by the environment. When we have high wind speed, which also high wind speed, we seem to have low detection ranges and rates, and when we have low wind speeds, we have high detection rates. And now we'll move on to Berlin whales. This is also from the sub-Antarctic region, and we can see that the different whale species that we found from this study. We found about 6 Berlin whale species. From the past research work, they only found 4 whale species, if I remember correctly. However, they could not split or differentiate between the blue whale species. And we were in this case able to differentiate between Antarctic blue whales, which produce the Z call, and Madagascar pygmy blue whales, which produce unit A and unit B. And now also brought a new species, which is a female, and also the sow whales that were not previously cited, and Antarctic blue whale bioduck, which were also previously not cited in that region. And this table here shows the effect of the island masks that mask some of the sound that was produced by some of the animals in that area. And yeah, so this is a busy slide. I'm not going to detail, but the most important information here is that all of these whales were affected by the environment. Whenever there's changes in the environment, it seems to affect the acoustic presence and their vocalizing behavior in this area. To end off, I would like to give you some take-home messages. From my results or from this work I've presented, we can see that we're able to detect seasonal acoustic presence of whales. We can use acoustics or sound to determine the dial vocalizing behavior of whales. We can also determine the environmental influence on the acoustic occurrence of marine mammals. We can differentiate between multiple species within the same region. We also can give some information on habitat use and also the effects of or the influence of underwater noise on marine mammal adaptability, and many more other things that you could have seen or could have thought of from this presentation. So the sky's the limit. There's so much things that we can do with sound to study marine mammals. And this just gives some indication of some of the work that we could possibly do with marine mammals and with sound to study marine mammals and improve our knowledge for us to be able to advise on conservation and management of these species. And I'd like to thank my collaborators and funders for making this work possible. And I'd also like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking your time to attend this seminar.
Amazing. Thank you so much. What an expansive body of work. Like that take-home message of the sky's the limit with just how many species and different types of information you've been able to cover is just so impressive. And so with that, we have some time for questions. You're welcome to share it in the chat, or you can turn your camera and your microphone on and ask them yourself. up to you. While people maybe are starting to think of some, I had one. You didn't cover this so much in your talk, but some people who might not be as familiar with acoustic work, what's the analysis process like to get all these different kinds of call rates and call counts? Like what sort of steps do you have to take to from the recordings to all of the amazing data you were able to compile?
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. That's it's a very interesting question. I guess
Yeah.
you also have experience that it is a lot of work, and unfortunately, in the interest of time, I didn't take you through all of that. So I use two different methods of detecting calls. So after the data has been collected, what's important is that we back up. So we first back up the data before we do analysis or anything or work on it. And then after that, then we go through the analysis of the data. And that takes usually the visual or manual analysis while go through the data minute by minute to actually see what is there in the sound before I can, if develop a detector to be able to detect the calls and have call rates. So you've seen with blue whales and fin whales, we're able to have call rates, and that was determined using a detector, automated detector, which will go through the data and automatically detect calls and give us the number of calls that are found within each file. And that will seem to be a very time saving and less labor intensive compared to going through the data manually and analyzing it to detect these calls. So those are the two methods that have been used or that I've used. And I know now people are now shifting into AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to help with the detection of calls, where those are trained to actually go through our data and detect these calls. But most importantly, we still have that human component where we have to go through the data and tell AI, this is the call you must have and train it and detect it in so many formats for AI to or machine learning techniques to be able to detect the calls within the sounds that we've or recordings that we've made.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for
I hope
that
that
great
answers your question.
overview. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And hopefully, yeah, a nice overview of the different options and certainly how technology has been changing that of late. We had another
Yeah.
question in the chat from Tobias who asked, could you give a short insight on how you became a marine mammal scientist? And can you recommend any literature about this topic?
All right, sure. Yeah. Um, how I became a marine scientist. It's all right, sure. I guess it was fate. When growing up, I grew up north, South Africa, just outside the Kruger National Park. Those who are familiar with South Africa, it's one of the famous wildlife marine park where we used to go to when I was young, and I wanted to be a wildlife management or wildlife biologist when growing up. That was not until university when I was doing my undergrad and I was exposed to marine research, and I thought it was interesting. And I first studied fish, and then from fish, I slowly moved into marine mammals, and now I'm studying marine mammals, and I've been studying them for the past 10 years now. So that's a short answer on how I ended up being there. It was like an advert on the newspaper, which I saw, and then I applied. So yeah,
Amazing.
for more information on this, we've got a lot. Yeah, thanks. So we have a lot of communities in Africa. We have the African Bioacoustic community that provide information on marine mammal studies and how we can. Actually, it's not only for Africa. Anyone in the world can join the African Bioacoustics community and learn more about opportunities in marine mammal science. And we also have the MARAM, which is run by University of Victoria, where they provide information on publications and opportunities or internship and so on. And we also have Uncle Google that we can use to check out some information or interesting opportunities out there. So those are the few opportunities that I can think of. Of course, the social media as well, the opportunities, people advertising on Facebook and so on. So yeah, I think the first thing is to have interest. And when you have that, then you can contact someone who's working on the field. Always keen, and I'm sure my colleagues are always keen as well to help someone get started or get established in the field and collaborate and so on. So I also collaborated with other people, with different people, and you can see in the publications as well that a lot of people that I work with to do some of this work and be able to accomplish it.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and certainly again, yeah, a whole host of collaborations that go on in marine research and just yeah, expressing interest in the topic is a great way to start. Very funny that you founded newspaper advertisement and that's
Yeah.
what led you down. It's funny how these things come about. Um, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat or raised hands, but I thought I would ask one more, which is I know there's been a lot of talk lately with being able to identify dolphins to individuals with their signature whistles. And I was wondering how, like, you could determine different regional calls or species-specific calls with whales, but how are things going with being able to identify to individuals with whales? Is that possible yet or working on it?
Um, yeah, it seems for Wells is that's something interesting that we haven't looked into. I haven't seen any work on it. Uh, yeah, so based on the calls, the way they look like, for example, the call is a very simple call. It doesn't have much information like you would have with a dolphin whistle, which seem to be changing and frequency modulating for each individual. So I'll be interested to one day for us to be able to actually come up with such information. But those are for Berlin whales. And then you look into sperm whales, I think they're coming up with something. I saw a paper on AI and how they actually able to tell the language and so on. So hopefully something will come in the light where we can be able to differentiate between different animals or different even individuals using acoustics.
Yeah, amazing. And yeah, so excited to see all the new work coming out about those sorts of things for sure. So with that,
Yeah.
I'll give it another long pause for any last questions.
Audrey, I have one.
Yeah.
So yeah, the talk about AI is one that comes up a lot in fish sounds, and I think sometimes in fish acoustics we don't draw quite enough on marine mammal acoustics because it's really this phenomenal case study that we can like draw so much information from and kind of understand what the big changes were or what the big questions were. Um, and I know it's a tough number to say, but like as a rough estimate, how far do you think in the marine mammal space we are from AI being able to classify calls at a reasonable rate, right? This is something where we kind of bring it up in real time of like, oh, maybe AI on this project, but then it's like a couple more years later and a couple more years later we have data to process. And so, just as a rough estimate, do you think that's 3 years away, 5, 10, and I understand that's a tough number, but yeah, I'd love some insight.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Karen. That's an interesting one. Yeah, if I were to guess, I'll say uh, maybe yeah, it's difficult to say because we think we're almost there, and then we work on this topic, we realize there's so many other things that we don't know. So maybe 3 years. That would be very optimistic. Uh, uh, but yeah, we're getting there. There's so many studies now. For example, with a twag uh, uh, paper that I recently reviewed, some of the authors they work with Google guys and use AI to actually detect and classify calls from uh, breeders' wells in real time and so on. So such developments are actually moving us closer to be able to do this work with absolute confidence in the near future. And we have the Northern Right Well project as well in the US, where they're using AI detectors to detect notified right whale presence real time and send notifications to marine managers and scientists and so on to notify them of presence of suffering right whales and for ships to reduce speed and so on. So that shows that there's some development, and we might actually be closer than we think, although we might also be far away from cracking this problem. So yeah, it's a tough one to ask.
No, I think that's perfect. I think that's, yeah, the one thing I was thinking about is in relation to students where like you never want to sign them up for a project when it's too soon. So there's kind of that sweet spot of this is possible. Now we can start to think about it, in the timeline of a master's degree or the timeline of a PhD. And so, yeah, I'll watch the marine mammal work more closely. We have another question in the chat. Someone's wondering about the difference in acoustic characteristics for marine mammal calls with and without sea ice.
Right. Oh, sorry. Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. So the difference between a marine mammal call, so like the type of the call, or not probably more the acoustic characteristics of the call, so how the call sounds when there's ice, there's no ice.
Oh, okay. I from experience, I haven't seen any difference in terms of the characteristics. What could possibly change with the presence and absence of ice would be the detection range, because when there's ice, the ocean becomes quiet. It will be all is covered. It's not, you no longer have the wave movement that produces a lot of noise. So the only difference that we found is that when there's ice, the detection ranges were further because uh, the area is quiet. And when there's no ice, then there's more noise because of the surface movement that produces noise as such. And also, I think other thing could be the behavior in terms of their vocalizing. They could be vocalizing less, less when there's ice because more when there's ice because they'll be feeding and so on. So they have more opportunity to do so. And sometimes for other species that don't like ice, so when there's ice, they will be less vocalizing because they will have moved out of the area. So yeah, I think that's the difference. So for an animal to be in an ice-covered area, they have to adapt to that. And if you cannot deal with the ice environment, like with fin whales, they know that they don't like ice. Whenever there's ice, they move out of the area. And blue whales and Antarctic minke whales and so on that can deal to a certain extent with ice presence, then they have those uh, adaptations for the bodies to be able to deal with ice and thermoregulate properly to deal with the presence of ice. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Definitely. Yeah, we gotta thank you. Thanks a lot from the person who asked the question. So, and yeah, a lot of different complexities for how certain environmental factors could affect calls and their characteristics for sure. So with that, we are at 1 hour. And so I think we'll wrap it up there. But thank you so much again for joining us and for leading off the seminar series. We have a lot of really exciting talks coming up. The next one will be November 22nd with Aaron Rice on fish sounds, all about fish sounds. And so if you want to switch animal topics, then feel free to join us then. And thank you so much again, everyone, for joining, and for Fannie again for giving us all of your insights.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for inviting me, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.
All right, have a good weekend. Bye.
Yeah, bye.